welcome to Void of Rules. I was just looking at my channel analytics, and a shocking 85.5% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. If you're enjoying these stories, consider hitting that subscribe button to help me reach 1k subscribers by the end of the year. It costs absolutely nothing, takes just 1 second, and you can always change your mind later. Drop a like on the video too. It really helps with the algorithm. Now let's jump into today's story. The night had started like any other. I was driving home from visiting my brother in the next county over, taking the long stretch of Highway 16 that cut through miles of farmland. It was nearly midnight, that strange liminal hour when the world feels both asleep and somehow more awake than ever. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty road ahead. The moon was absent tonight, leaving the sky a vast canvas of stars, unmarred by light pollution. I should have found it beautiful, but something about the sheer emptiness of it all left me unsettled. I reached for the radio dial, hoping some late-night DJ would keep me company for the remaining 40 miles home. The radio had been acting up lately, an old car problem I'd been putting off fixing. Static crackled through the speakers as I turned the dial, fragments of songs and voices fading in and out. Expect clear skies throughout the new album dropping next. Reports of unusual atmospheric. I settled on a classic rock station playing Tom Petty, tapping my fingers against the steering wheel. That's when I noticed how unusually quiet it had become outside. No crickets, no distant rumble of trucks on the interstate that ran parallel a few miles west. Just silence, punctuated by the hum of my engine and the music from my speakers. The radio suddenly cut out, replaced by a harsh, piercing tone that made me wince. I recognized it immediately. The emergency broadcast system. I'd heard it countless times during tests, always followed by the calm reassurance that this was only a test. But this time was different. The tone abruptly ceased, and a voice came through my speakers. It wasn't the standard EBS announcement voice. It sounded slightly mechanical, as if someone was speaking through some kind of filter or voice changer. This is an emergency alert for all citizens. Within broadcast range, this is not a test. I repeat, this is not a test. I slowed my car slightly, my attention now fully on the radio. For your safety, you must follow these instructions precisely. Failure to comply may result in serious harm. My first thought was the severe weather. Maybe a tornado had been spotted. But tornadoes weren't common in this area, especially not at night in early autumn. Rule 1, stay in your vehicle until exactly 3:27 AM. I glanced at my dashboard clock. 12:14 AM. More than 3 hours? That seemed excessive for any weather event. Rule 2, do not look directly at any streetlights that flicker more than 3 times. My unease deepened. This wasn't like any emergency broadcast I'd ever heard. Rule 3, if you see another vehicle with its headlights off, do not flash your lights at it. Do not attempt to alert the driver. Rule 4, keep all windows closed regardless of what you hear outside. The voice paused, and I waited for more information. Explanation of a chemical spill or terrorist threat, or something that would make these strange instructions make sense. Instead, the broadcast cut off, returning to Tom Petty as if nothing had happened. I shook my head, chuckling nervously. Had to be some kind of prank. Maybe a college radio station hijacking the frequency. I reached for my phone to call my brother, to see if he'd heard anything similar. No signal, not even a single bar. I frowned and tried again, restarting the phone. Nothing. This stretch of highway usually had decent coverage. I tried my GPS next, thinking I could at least see how much longer, until I reached the next town. The screen flickered, showing me in the middle of the ocean, then jumping to what appeared to be Antarctica, then back to the ocean. I switched it off with a frustrated sigh. That's when I noticed the car ahead of me, pulled over on the shoulder. As I approached, I saw the driver standing outside, looking up at the sky. I slowed, wondering if they needed help. Another car was stopped about 100 yards further, its hazards blinking rhythmically. And another beyond that. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature, though I suddenly realized the air in my car had grown significantly colder. I could see my breath fogging in front of me. I cranked the heater higher, but it continued blowing cold air. In the distance, beyond the gentle hills that bordered the highway, strange lights danced across the sky. Not the familiar flash of lightning or the steady beam of a spotlight. These moved with purpose, geometric patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The radio burst back to life, the mechanical voice returning with greater urgency. "Attention. We have confirmation that the situation has escalated. Compliance is critical for survival. We repeat, compliance is critical for survival." My mouth went dry. Whatever prank this was, it had gone too far. Additional rules follow. Rule 5. If you see someone walking alongside the road who appears to be limping, accelerate immediately. Do not stop, under any circumstances. Rule 6. If your radio plays music between announcements, change stations immediately. I quickly turned the dial, finding nothing but static across the band. Rule 7. Do not respond to any knocking on your windows, even if you recognize the person. The broadcast ended again, leaving me in silence, the static gone too. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, torn between dismissing this as an elaborate hoax and the growing sense that something was very wrong. A flicker of movement caught my eye. Headlights, approaching from behind. They were moving erratically, speeding up and slowing down in uneven bursts. As the car drew closer, I could see the driver was alone, frantically looking around as they drove. The car began to pass me. The driver, a middle-aged woman with panic etched across her face, made brief eye contact with me. She mouthed something I couldn't understand, then sped away. I watched her taillights shrink in the distance until they suddenly swerved sharply. Her car skidded to a halt, and I squinted to see what had happened. A figure was standing by the roadside, its silhouette visible in her headlights. Even from this distance, I could see the pronounced limp as it moved toward her stopped car. Rule 5 echoed in my mind. If you see someone walking alongside the road who appears to be limping, accelerate immediately. The woman's brake lights went out. For a moment, I thought she was going to drive away. Then, her headlights switched off too. The limping figure reached her car. I couldn't see clearly what happened next, but the car door opened, spilling light onto the asphalt. The woman stepped out, and then both she and the figure were gone. Not walking away, not obscured by the car, simply gone, as if they'd been erased from existence. My heart pounded against my ribs. I checked my phone again, still no signal. The clock on my dashboard now read 12:47 AM. Still hours until 3:27 AM. I decided to keep driving, reasoning that moving towards civilization was better than sitting alone on this increasingly bizarre stretch of highway. 10 miles later, I saw the welcome lights of Millfield, a small town I'd passed through dozens of times on my way to visit my brother. But as I approached, something felt off about the familiar skyline. The water tower that usually dominated the horizon seemed shorter somehow, and the church steeple appeared to lean at an angle I'd never noticed before. The streets were largely deserted, as expected for a small town after midnight. But the few people I did see were standing unnaturally still. A man on a corner looking up at the sky. A woman in a bathrobe in the middle of the road, neither moving nor responding to my headlights. To my surprise, the broadcast I'd heard on the highway was playing from speakers mounted on light poles throughout the town. The same mechanical voice echoed between buildings. Rule 8. Do not enter any building with a blue door. Rule 9. Avoid groups of more than 4 people standing together. Rule 10. If you hear church bells, seek indoor shelter immediately. Rule 11. Do not look at reflective surfaces for more than 5 seconds. Rule 12. If someone asks you what time it is, tell them it's 2:15, regardless of actual time. I drove slowly through the main street, noticing how the few open businesses had their lights on but appeared empty. All except one, a 24-hour diner at the end of the street, its windows glowing warmly, silhouettes visible inside. I pulled into the parking lot, remembering Rule 1. Stay in your vehicle until 3:27 AM. But I needed answers, and the people inside might know something. After a moment's hesitation, I turned off the engine and stepped out into the night. The air felt wrong somehow, heavier, with an electric quality that made the hair on my arm stand on end. I hurried to the diner's entrance, glancing nervously at my reflection in the glass door, but remembering not to look for more than 5 seconds. Inside, about a dozen people sat scattered among the booths and counter seats. They all looked up as I entered, expressions ranging from suspicious to relieved. A bell above the door jingled as it closed behind me, and several people flinched at the sound. "You heard it too?" a man in a trucker cap asked from the nearest booth. I nodded, sliding into a booth near the door. On my radio, driving in from Harriston. "It's playing everywhere," said a woman with short grey hair. "TV, radio, phone alerts for those who still had service. Started about an hour ago." The diner's television mounted in the corner showed nothing but static, occasionally flickering to show what looked like landscapes I didn't recognize, places with wrong-coloured skies and strangely shaped horizons. A waitress approached my table. Her name tag read Donna, but something about her movement seemed mechanical, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring, without waiting for my answer. "What's happening?" I asked her. "Do you know anything about the broadcast?" She paused, coffee pot hovering over my cup. "I've worked here 15 years, never missed a day. The regulars like their coffee hot and their eggs over easy." She continued pouring, even as the coffee reached the rim and began to spill over. "The rules are for our protection. We must follow the rules." An older man at the counter reached over and gently took the coffee pot from her hand. "That's enough, Donna. Why don't you check on the pies?" She nodded vacantly and walked back to the kitchen. The old man slid into the seat across from me. "She's been like that since the first broadcast. Not everyone is handling it well." He offered his hand. "Frank Turner. I've lived in Millfield my whole life." I introduced myself, accepting his handshake. His palm was ice cold. "Some of us are trying to figure this out," Frank continued, nodding towards a group in the corner booth who were huddled over what looked like maps and papers. "Others are just doing what the voice says, no questions asked." "And you?" Frank's weathered face creased with a grim smile. "I was here in 82 when something similar happened. Not as widespread, not as many rules, but the same voice, the same kind of instructions." My coffee sat forgotten as I leaned forward. "What happened then?" "Most folks followed the rules. Some didn't. The ones who didn't." He shook his head. "They found Miller's boy 3 days later in the quarry. What was left of him anyway. The others who disobeyed were never found. And after 3 days, it just stopped. Life went back to normal. Nobody from outside seemed to notice anything had happened. When we tried to tell people, they thought we were crazy. Eventually, we stopped talking about it." Frank paused, tracing a finger through the spilled coffee on the table. "But things were never quite the same. People who followed the rules the closest, they changed. Nothing you could put your finger on, but different somehow. More distant. Like they'd seen something the rest of us hadn't." "Why didn't you leave town after that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Where would I go? Whatever this is, it's not just in Millfield. Not anymore. And besides, this is home." A loud bang from outside made everyone jump. Through the window, I could see a car had crashed into a light pole. The driver stumbled out, looked around wildly, then began running down the street. No one in the diner moved to help. Rule 1, Frank said quietly, stay in your vehicle until 3:27 a.m. From the corner, a man in a business suit who'd been listening to our conversation suddenly stood up. This is mass hysteria, nothing more. You're all being manipulated by some prankster with access to the emergency system. Jake, Frank warned, sit down. No, Jake replied firmly. I'm not spending the night in this diner because some voice on the radio told me to stay put until some arbitrary time. This is America, for God's sake. We saw what happened to the Richards girl when she opened her window, a woman said quietly. Jake scoffed. You saw her get pulled by the wind when a sudden gust came through. That's it. There wasn't any wind, another man countered, and she didn't just get pulled, she got folded, like paper. I felt nauseated at the description, remembering Rule 4 about keeping windows closed. Jake straightened his tie. I'm leaving. Anyone with any sense is welcome to join me. No one moved. Your funeral, he muttered, heading for the door. Frank called after him. At least follow the other rules, Jake. Don't look at flickering lights. Don't acknowledge anyone with their lights off. Jake waved dismissively and pushed through the door. We all watched through the windows as he walked to his car, got in, and started the engine. His headlights came on, illuminating the now empty street. He began to pull out of the parking lot when his car suddenly stopped. From our vantage point, we could see him struggling with the steering wheel. Then his headlights switched off. A moment later, they came back on. But something was wrong. The light seemed different, darker somehow, with a bluish tint. Jake sat motionless in the driver's seat. Then, he turned and looked directly at us through the diner window. His face was expressionless, eyes wide and unblinking. He raised one hand and pressed it against his window. The fingers splayed at unnatural angles. Everyone in the diner moved away from the windows. The television in the corner suddenly blared to life, the mechanical voice returning. The rules are adapting to your choices. Listen carefully. We all turned toward the screen, which now showed a clear picture of the inside of the diner. Our diner, from an angle that suggested a camera in the ceiling corner. I looked up but saw nothing there. The person with the plaid jacket must stand in the southwest corner. A teenager wearing a red and black plaid jacket nervously stood and moved to the corner. Anyone who has ever broken a bone must close their eyes for the next 10 minutes. Several people, including Frank, closed their eyes. The person who most recently arrived must write their name on the bathroom mirror. All eyes turned to me. Don't do it, a woman whispered. It's trying to separate us. The television crackled. Non-compliance will result in group consequences. The lights in the diner flickered, and a low humming began to emanate from all around us, as if the building itself was vibrating. It's learning, Frank said without opening his eyes, adapting to what we do. The longer this goes on, the more specific it gets. I stood slowly. I'll do it, but I'm not staying in there. I walked to the bathroom, pushing open the door cautiously. It looked normal enough. 2 stalls, a urinal, a sink beneath a spotty mirror. I approached the sink, noticing my reflection seemed slightly delayed, moving a fraction of a second after I did. Rule 11. Do not look at reflective surfaces for more than 5 seconds. I quickly wrote my name on the mirror with a pen from my pocket, trying not to look directly at my reflection. As I finished the last letter, I thought I saw something move behind me in the mirror. I spun around, but the bathroom was empty. When I turned back, my reflection was gone entirely, the mirror showing only the empty bathroom behind me. I backed out quickly, returning to the diner where the others waited anxiously. It wants something from us, I told them. This isn't just about following rules for our safety. It's changing things. Frank nodded, eyes still closed. In 82, we thought it was some government experiment gone wrong. Now I'm not so sure. Feels more like something breaking through, The rules are like instructions for allowing it to happen. Breaking through from where? I asked. A woman who'd been examining the maps looked up. I've been tracking the pattern of where these broadcasts are being reported on social media. Before the networks went down, they radiate from a central point. She pointed to a circled area on her map. The Harmond Research Facility. I recognized the name. A secretive lab about 20 miles north that was rumored to do advanced physics research. What if we went there? I suggested. Maybe we could stop this somehow. Too dangerous, Frank replied, finally opening his eyes as his 10 minutes ended. We need to follow the rules until 3:27 a.m. Then, maybe this passes like before. The debate was cut short when the diner's light suddenly went out. In the darkness, the television glowed brighter, the mechanical voice returning, Phase 1 is complete, beginning Phase 2. The screen changed to show split images of different locations, other restaurants, homes, offices, all filled with people following various rules. In each location, I noticed subtle changes in the people who'd been complying the longest, their movements more rigid, expressions blank, some with subtle physical alterations like elongated fingers or too wide eyes. The preparation continues according to schedule, the voice announced. Those who have followed all instructions are advancing appropriately. With mounting horror, I realized what Frank had suggested might be right. The rules weren't protecting us from something. They were changing us for something. I looked around at the others in the diner, those who'd been in town when the broadcast started, who had followed more rules for longer, looked subtly different now. Their posture too straight, movements too precise. Even Frank, I noticed with a chill, hadn't blinked once since opening his eyes. I need to stop this, I said quietly, backing towards the door. Frank's head turned to me with mechanical precision. The rules must be followed. For everyone's safety. They're not for our safety, I replied. They're preparing us for something, changing us. Several others stood now, moving toward me with the same unnatural precision as Frank. I bolted for the door, bursting out into the night air. Behind me, I heard the diner door open as they followed. I ran to my car, jumping in and starting the engine in one fluid motion. As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The people from the diner stood in a perfect line in front of the building, watching me go. They didn't chase, they didn't need to. I drove north towards the Harmond facility. The radio came back on by itself, the mechanical voice returning, "Attention, a non-compliant subject is moving toward the source. All compliant individuals should ignore the following instructions." My blood ran cold as I realized it was talking about me. For non-compliant individuals only, return to your last location immediately. Danger awaits at the source. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pressing the accelerator. Whatever waited at Harmond couldn't be worse than what I was leaving behind. The road stretched before me, eerily empty. The night seemed to press in around my car, the darkness almost tangible beyond my headlights. I checked the clock. 1:52 a.m. Still a long way from 3:27. As I drove, I noticed the landscape becoming increasingly unfamiliar. I'd travelled this road countless times before, but landmarks I remembered were missing, while new ones appeared that had never been there. A barn in the middle of what should have been an empty field. A cluster of mailboxes where no houses stood. A figure suddenly darted across the road ahead of me. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop just inches from where it had passed. Through the windshield, I could see someone standing at the edge of my headlights. A woman in a nightgown, her back to me. Rule 7 echoed in my mind. Do not respond to any knocking on your windows, even if you recognize the person. As if hearing my thoughts, the woman slowly turned around. It was Donna, the waitress from the diner. But her face was wrong. Her features shifted and blurred as I watched, as if they couldn't decide what to be. She took a step toward my car, then another. I threw the car into reverse, backing up rapidly, then shifted into drive and sped around her. In my rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the middle of the road, still facing the direction my car had been, not turning as I drove away. The radio crackled to life once more. Attention. The non-compliant subject cannot be allowed to reach the source. All compliant individuals in proximity should implement Containment Protocol 7. I had no idea what Containment Protocol 7 meant, but I didn't want to find out. I pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing my car to its limits. The landscape grew increasingly strange as I drove. Telephone poles leaned at impossible angles without falling. Trees seemed to shift position when I wasn't looking directly at them. The road itself occasionally rippled like water, though my car moved over it normally. I passed other vehicles, all stopped, their occupants standing beside them in the same unnatural stillness I'd seen in town. None moved as I drove by. None seemed to see me. A large truck suddenly pulled onto the road ahead of me, blocking both lanes. Its headlights were off. I remembered Rule 3. If you see another vehicle with its headlights off, do not flash your lights at it. I slowed, looking for a way around. The shoulder was too narrow, bordered by a steep ditch. As I approached, the truck's door opened, and the driver stepped out. In the ambient moonlight, I could see it was Jake from the diner, his movements jerky and unnatural. He turned toward my car, then raised both arms straight out from his sides. Behind him, more figures emerged from the darkness at the roadside, all with the same rigid posture, arms outstretched. I stopped about 50 yards away, mind racing. There was no way forward, and I couldn't risk turning around with them watching. Then I remembered something, a maintenance road about a quarter-mile back that cut through the fields. I'd noticed it on my drives before, but never had reason to use it. Slowly, I began to back up, keeping my eyes on the figures ahead. They remained motionless, watching. When I was far enough away, I executed a three-point turn and drove back the way I'd come, scanning the roadside for the turnoff. I spotted it, little more than a dirt track disappearing into the cornfields. I killed my headlights and turned onto it, navigating by the faint starlight. The cornstalk scraped against my car as I drove, the path barely wide enough for my vehicle. After what felt like an eternity of slow, careful driving, I emerged on another paved road. I recognized it as a secondary route that would eventually take me to Harmond, though it would add miles to my journey. I switched my headlights back on and continued, checking my mirror constantly for signs of pursuit. The clock now read 2:23 AM. The Harmon facility came into view as I crested a hill, a sprawling complex of low buildings surrounded by chain-link fence. Even from a distance, I could see that part of it had been destroyed. One building collapsed entirely, others showing signs of damage. As I drew closer, the radio burst to life again, the voice now frantic, distorted. Emergency override. All units converge on Harmon facility. Priority 1 containment breach. Repeat. Priority 1 containment breach. The road ahead of me suddenly filled with vehicles. Cars, trucks, even a school bus, all driving erratically, converging on the facility from different directions. Their headlights were off, but I could see figures inside, moving with the now familiar mechanical precision. I pulled off the road, cutting across a field toward the back of the facility. The fence had collapsed in several places from whatever damage had occurred inside. I parked behind an abandoned maintenance shed and got out, crouching low as I made my way toward the nearest breach in the perimeter. The air here felt wrong, heavy and charged, as if before a thunderstorm. Strange lights pulsed from within the damaged portions of the facility, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground. As I approached the main gate, I was surprised to find it standing open, the guard booth empty. I slipped inside, keeping to the shadows as more vehicles arrived at the front entrance, disgorging their passengers, people from Millfield and surrounding areas, all moving with the same unnatural coordination. I made my way to what appeared to be the main entrance and found it shattered, glass crunching under my feet as I entered. Emergency lights cast a red glow over the lobby. Papers were scattered everywhere, furniture overturned as if people had left in a hurry. A security desk stood empty, monitors showing only static. One monitor flickered to life as I passed, the mechanical voice speaking directly to me. "You should not be here. Return to comply with the rules. Preparation is nearly complete." "What preparation?" I demanded, knowing it could hear me. "What are you doing to people?" The screen changed to show various locations, the diner, highways, homes, where people stood motionless, their features now noticeably altered. Bodies elongated, fingers too long, eyes too large. "Preparation for arrival," the voice replied. "This reality must be adjusted. The inhabitants must be adjusted." Adjusted for what? For those who come next. A map appeared on the screen showing a spreading pattern of broadcasts emanating from this facility, now covering most of the state, and expanding. "You can't stop it," the voice continued. "The threshold has been crossed. The door is opening." I turned away from the monitor, moving deeper into the facility. I needed to find the source of the broadcast, whatever was generating these rules and changes. The corridors grew increasingly distorted as I moved inward, walls curving at subtle angles, doorways slightly too tall or too narrow. I followed the humming sound, which grew louder with each turn. I found myself in what appeared to be a laboratory area, workstations abandoned mid-experiment, equipment still running. On one desk, a notebook lay open. I picked it up, scanning the handwritten notes. Day 37. The resonance frequency continues to increase. Dr. Patel believes we've detected a pattern in the fluctuations. Some kind of communication attempt. Day 38. Breakthrough. The signal is definitely structured, carrying information. We've begun translation efforts. Day 40. First partial translations are disturbing. Signal appears to contain instructions. Purpose unclear. Day 42. Exposure to the signal is causing concerning physiological changes in test subjects, recommending immediate shutdown of receiver. Day 43. Management overruled shutdown. They want to establish communication. God help us. The final entry was a hasty scrawl. It's coming through. Not just signals anymore. Containment failing. If anyone finds this, the rules are not protection. They're preparation. Don't listen. I set the notebook down, a chill running through me. Whatever had happened here, it had started as an experiment in communication, perhaps with something from beyond our world, and ended in disaster. A crash from somewhere nearby startled me. I ducked behind a desk as footsteps approached, the uneven gait of multiple people moving in unsettling synchronization. Through a gap between cabinets, I watched as a group of Harmon staff members walked past the laboratory entrance. They moved with the same mechanical precision I'd seen in the town, but their transformations were far more advanced. Limbs elongated, joints bending in wrong directions, faces stretched into expressionless masks. When they had passed, I continued deeper into the facility, following signs for central receiver array. The humming grew louder with each step, becoming an almost physical pressure against my eardrums. I found what I was looking for in a large circular room at the center of the facility. The space was dominated by a massive machine, cables and equipment surrounding what looked like a tear in the air itself, a vertical split about 7 feet tall from which pulsed rhythmic waves of light. Around the room, bodies of what I assumed were researchers lay crumpled, some partially transformed into something no longer entirely human. Computer terminals lined the walls, their screens all showing the same broadcast being transmitted worldwide. One body near a control panel still clutched a recorder. I picked it up and pressed play, hearing a desperate voice. The experiment breached containment at 11:17 p.m. The entity began emitting instructions, seemingly random at first, but we've determined they're creating neurological changes in those who follow them. Some kind of preparation for a larger incursion. We've tried to shut down the tear, but it's self-sustaining now. God help us all. The recording continued, the voice growing more frantic. The changes start small, altered perception, increased suggestibility, then physical alterations begin. We've observed cellular reorganization, unlike anything in terrestrial biology. It's as if their bodies are being reformatted, reconfigured to survive in conditions not native to Earth. Most disturbing are the behavioral changes. Subjects become focused solely on spreading the rules, bringing others into compliance. They seem to retain memories and some personality, but their primary drive is to serve whatever is coming through. It's like a viral takeover, using our own emergency systems against us. We've tried to warn people, but our messages are being intercepted, changed. Only the rules get through now. The recording ended. I looked up at the pulsing tear. This was the source, not just of the broadcast, but of whatever was coming through. The mechanical voice spoke again, now emanating directly from the tear itself. Preparation complete, beginning final phase. The tear widened slightly, the light pulsing faster. On the screens around the room, I could see people everywhere beginning to move in unison, walking with jerky movements toward unknown destinations. I had to stop this, but how? My eyes fell on the control panel where I'd found the recorder. Emergency protocols were outlined on a laminated sheet beside it. Among them, in case of dimensional breach, initiate collapse sequence. A red button beneath a protective cover was labelled collapse. The voice from the tear spoke again. Your presence is unexpected. You have not been prepared. You will be removed. The tear pulsed brighter, and I felt a pressure in my mind. Images of rules I should follow, commands I should obey. I gritted my teeth against the intrusion. The rules, I muttered, an idea forming. The rules are the key. If the rules were preparing people by changing how their minds worked, what would happen if the rules contradicted themselves? Could I create a paradox? I lunged for the broadcast controls, finding the microphone. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the transmit button. Attention, I said, mimicking the mechanical voice as best I could. New rule. All previous rules must be broken immediately. Breaking rules is now mandatory. Not breaking rules will result in immediate consequences. I released the button, watching the screens to see if my message had transmitted. On one, I saw the people from the diner suddenly stop their synchronized movement, looking confused. The tear pulsed erratically, the light fluctuating wildly. "What have you done?" the voice demanded, its mechanical calm faltering. "Created a paradox," I replied. "If people must follow the rules, and the rules now say to break the rules, they're stuck in a loop." The tear began to contract and expand rapidly, the light now strobing painfully bright. I shielded my eyes, reaching blindly for the collapse button. My fingers found the protective cover, flipped it open, and pressed the button beneath. Alarms blared throughout the facility. A computerized voice announced, "Dimensional collapse initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately. Collapse in T-3 minutes." The mechanical voice from the tear became distorted, fragmented. "You cannot. This is not. We will return." I ran, navigating the increasingly unstable corridors as the building shook around me. Behind me, the humming rose to a painful shriek. I burst through the main doors just as a blinding flash erupted from within the facility. The shockwave knocked me off my feet, and for a moment, everything went dark. When I came to, dawn was breaking over the horizon. The Harmon facility lay in ruins, smoke rising from the collapsed buildings. My car miraculously appeared undamaged. I drove back toward town as the sun rose, unsure what I would find. The strange distortions in the landscape had vanished, everything returning to its normal appearance. As I reached Millfield, I saw people on the streets, normal people, going about their morning routines as if nothing had happened. I stopped at the diner, now busy with breakfast customers. Inside, Donna the waitress served coffee with a genuine smile. There was no sign of Frank, or any of the others from the night before. "Excuse me," I asked her, "do you remember anything unusual happening last night? Any strange broadcasts?" She looked at me quizzically. "Broadcasts? No, honey. Been a quiet week. You look like you've had a rough night, though. Coffee's on the house." I sat at the counter trying to process everything that had happened. Had I stopped it? Or had everyone simply forgotten, as Frank had described happening after the 1982 incident? As I sipped my coffee, the television above the counter switched to a news report. The anchor was discussing an explosion at the Harmond Research Facility, describing it as a tragic accident resulting from a gas leak. The report mentioned several researchers unaccounted for, presumed dead. No mention of broadcasts, no mention of rules, no mention of people changing. I paid for my breakfast and left, driving home in a daze. My apartment looked exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago, when I'd headed out to visit my brother. The normality of it all was almost shocking after what I'd experienced. I tried calling my brother, but he didn't answer. When I finally reached him that evening, he had no recollection of any strange broadcasts or rules. According to him, we'd had a pleasant visit. I'd left around 10 p.m. and that was that. When I pressed him about it, he grew concerned, suggesting maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed the whole thing. But I knew what I had seen, what I had experienced. Over the following weeks, I scoured news reports, online forums, social media, anything that might confirm what had happened. I found nothing concrete, just scattered accounts of mass hallucinations, reported in several counties, attributed to some unidentified airborne contaminant supposedly released in the Harmond accident. I tried to contact the families of researchers who had worked at Harmond, but they either wouldn't speak to me or told stories that didn't add up. One widow insisted her husband had died of a heart attack at home, despite his name being on the official list of those missing after the explosion. 42 days after that night, I received a plain envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list of names, researchers from Harmond, including those officially declared dead. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Not over, just dormant. 327 remains important, watch the radio. The handwriting matched the notebook I'd found in the lab. I didn't know what to do with this information. Going to the authorities seemed pointless. Either they were already aware and covering it up, or they'd dismiss me as another conspiracy theorist fixated on the Harmond incident. So I waited and watched and listened. Life seemingly returned to normal. I went back to work, paid my bills, met friends for dinner, but I kept a radio nearby at all times. And every night at 3:27 a.m, I found myself awake, watching the dial for any sign of that mechanical voice returning. 3 months passed without incident. I began to wonder if perhaps I had imagined it all, if some gas leak at Harmond had caused mass hallucinations, just like the official story claimed. Then came the night when my radio switched on by itself. It was 3:27 a.m. exactly. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, but the sudden burst of statics had jolted me awake. I sat up, heart pounding, as the familiar tone of the emergency broadcast system filled my apartment. But instead of the mechanical voice, there was only a series of numbers, repeated 3 times, 37.829 by 105.486, 37.829 by 105.486, 37.829 by 105.486. Then silence. I scrambled for a pen, writing down the numbers, coordinates. I pulled up a map on my laptop, entering them with shaking hands. They pointed to a location in rural Colorado, miles from any major town. Just empty wilderness, according to the satellite view. The next night, same time, the radio activated again with a different set of coordinates. The night after that, another. Always at exactly 3:27 AM. Always just the coordinates. Repeated 3 times. I plotted them all on a map, expecting to see some pattern emerge. What I found chilled me to the bone. The points formed a perfect circle, roughly 200 miles in diameter. At its center was a facility marked on the map only as government reservation, restricted access. I had to know what was there. I took a leave of absence from work, packed my car, and drove west. 5 days later, I arrived at the edge of the circle, at the coordinates from the first broadcast. There was nothing there, just high desert scrubland stretching to the horizon. But as I stood looking out across the landscape, my radio suddenly switched on in my car. No emergency tone this time, just the mechanical voice, clearer than I'd ever heard it. "Welcome back, observer. You have been expected." I spun around, but there was no one there. Just empty desert and my car. "Your interference was temporary. The adjustment continues on schedule, albeit with greater subtlety. You cannot stop what has already begun." "What do you want?" I shouted into the empty air. "Integration, preparation, evolution. What approach does an invader now comes as a guide? The rules have changed, but the purpose remains." "I'll stop you again," I said, though I had no idea how. "Look around you, observer. It has already begun." I turned slowly, scanning the horizon. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then I noticed them, figures standing in the distance, perfectly still, watching me. Dozens of them spread out across the landscape at regular intervals, all with the same elongated limbs, the same 2 wide eyes I'd seen that night at Harmond. And between them and around them, glints of metal in the sunlight. Structures being built, technology spreading across the landscape that didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. "The voice you heard on your radio was just the beginning," the mechanical voice continued, from my car. "The emergency broadcast was our first attempt, crude, rushed, imperfect. We have refined our methods. The rules are now embedded in everyday transmissions. Television programming, cell phone signals, internet traffic. Subtle, undetected, but just as effective." I backed toward my car, eyes fixed on the distant figures. None moved to stop me. "You cannot warn them," the voice said as I reached for the door handle. "They will not believe you, and even if they did, it's too late. The changes are molecular now, encoded in the very frequencies that power your civilization." "What are you?" I demanded. "We are what comes next," the voice replied simply, "as you were what came after the Neanderthal. Evolution has always required guidance. We are merely expediting the process." I got in my car and drove away, tires kicking up dust as I sped back toward the highway. In my rearview mirror, the figures remained motionless, watching me go. Back in civilization, I tried again to warn people. I created anonymous posts online, sent information to journalists, even attempted to contact government officials. Most ignored me. Some responded with concern for my mental health. One reporter seemed interested, but stopped returning my calls after her editor assigned her to a different story. The final blow came when I found subtle alterations in my messages after I'd sent them. Key details changed, coordinates shifted. My urgent warnings transformed into incoherent ramblings that no one would take seriously. They were in the systems now, in the infrastructure, in the airwaves, and possibly in the people. I began to notice small changes in those around me. Nothing dramatic, nothing that couldn't be explained away by normal human variation. A colleague's slightly too precise movements, a barista's eyes that seemed just a fraction larger than they should be, the way my neighbour would stand perfectly still in his yard for hours, staring at the sky. 5 months after my trip to Colorado, I woke at 3:27 a.m. to find my television, computer, phone and radio all activated simultaneously, each displaying or broadcasting the same message. Phase 2 complete. Beginning Phase 3. Thank you for your observation. Your function has been noted. I packed a bag that night and drove to the most remote cabin I could find for rent, deep in the mountains with no cell service, no internet, no cable TV. Just a gas generator for power and a wood stove for heat. That's where I am now, writing this all down. I don't know if anyone will ever read it. I don't know if anyone who reads it will believe it. But I need to record what happened, what I saw, what I know. I've disconnected or disabled every electronic device I brought with me, using only an old mechanical typewriter I found in the cabin to document my story. Sometimes I think I hear voices from the unplugged radio I keep in a drawer, but that might just be my imagination. Last week, I hiked to the nearest town for supplies. The people there seemed normal enough, but as I was loading groceries into my car, I noticed a group of children playing in the park across the street. They were playing some kind of game, standing in a circle and reciting what sounded like rules to each other. One of them saw me, watching, and waved. Her smile was friendly, but her eyes were just a little too large, a little too dark. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know if what's happening can be stopped, but I know this. Whatever approached our world through that tear at Harmond hasn't given up. It's just changed tactics. So I keep a journal, I avoid electronic devices, I stay away from populated areas, and most importantly, I never ever listen to broadcasts of any kind, because the rules are still out there, hidden now in the everyday noise of civilization. And something is still waiting to come through, one compliant person at a time. If you're reading this and the world still seems normal to you, cherish that normality. It may not last. And if things already seem strange, if people around you are changing in ways you can't quite define, remember this: don't follow the rules. Question everything. And when your radio turns on by itself, especially at 3:27 a.m, turn it off immediately. They're listening, they're watching, and they're waiting for us all to change.